Chapter 15. The Making of a Terrorist? Ari gulped down the last of his orange juice and grabbed the kitchen phone at its first ring. It was just before 7 o'clock, and Nicole mustn't be disturbed. An emergency operation had kept her at the hospital until after 2 o'clock in the morning. She'd come home just before 3, looking completely exhausted. "Hello?" he said in a low voice. "Professor Mueller, it's Abdy. Sorry to call so early." "That's okay, I was up." "I just got back from Israel half an hour ago. I've got to see you right away." "Is it that urgent?" "It's very urgent." "Look, I was just going to go out for my run. I'll meet you at the Tuileries, the West Fountain, in about half an hour, okay?" "I'll be there." Ari's 7-mile running route took him straight down onto the narrow cobblestoned Rue de l'Abbaye, across the broad, tree-lined Boul' Mich', and over the dew-dampened lawns of Jardin du Luxembourg. Exiting that huge park, he ran past the closed shops and small restaurants along Rue de Seine and crossed the river over Pont Royal, entering the nearly deserted Jardin des Tuileries at its southeast corner. When he came within sight of the western fountain in those spacious gardens, he could see Abdul already there, pacing back and forth in obvious agitation. "You know about China," Abdul called out as Ari came running up to him. Ari nodded as he took in deep gulps of air. "They've massacred hundreds of students. The leaders are in hiding, and there's a big search on to find them." "I won't say 'I told you so,'" said Ari between gasps. "It looked so good 2 days ago," lamented Abdul. 3,000 students on a hunger strike. 1 million people joining them in Tiananmen Square. Thousands more surrounding tanks and troops miles away so they couldn't get to the protesters. How could any peaceful demonstration be bigger or better? But it didn't work. "Here's what I got straight out of China last night," explained Ari. "The army wouldn't fight the students. It was close to a military mutiny. So they brought in units from Mongolia. Didn't speak the language of Beijing, knew nothing about thousands of workers supporting the students with strikes, told these troops that the people in Tiananmen Square had some incurable contagious disease. So that's why the carnage. Soldiers mowed those students down with machine guns, squashed them under their tanks like bugs." Abdul choked on the words. "It was horrible beyond description, but you didn't meet me here to tell me that." "No, but it showed me that nonviolence isn't going to work, and that finalized my decision." "I abhor the massacre as much as you do," replied Ari quietly, "but it doesn't prove that at all." "I think it does. Proves it to me." Abdul spat out his disillusionment. The rose-colored morning sun was just setting aflame the tops of the huge trees that lined the broad promenade through the heart of the Tuileries. Behind Abdul, the towering obelisk of Place de la Concorde pierced the soft blue sky, and far beyond, the massive Arc de Triomphe loomed like some spectral shape in the early morning haze. Numbed with the pain of the moment, Ari saw none of the beauty that lay before him. Instead, he saw hundreds of dead bodies and thousands of screaming young men and women fleeing the attacking Mongolian troops. Out of the horror stared faces of Chinese leaders who had been his students at the Sorbonne. These were young idealists he had recruited, trained, and worked with for years, and dearly loved. Did they now blame him? Would he ever see any of them again? "I had to tell you my decision." Abdul's words brought Ari back to the present. "I'm done with it. Finished. Nonviolence won't work." "Wait a minute." Ari put a hand on Abdul's shoulder. "Tiananmen Square doesn't prove that. I said there'd be a massacre. The timing was all wrong." "There'll never be a time. Armed revolution is the only way." "You can't be serious." "Dead serious." Abdul clenched a fist and raised it over his head. "If the students had been armed, they could have fought on their terms, and the fight would still be going on all over China." No, that would only have made the slaughter worse. Think, Abdy, think. Where could civilians get the weapons to fight a modern army? How could you smuggle in the arms, train thousands of guerrillas? It would cost billions. It's impossible. "It's not impossible." "Of course it is. The day for armed revolution is over. There's a better way, and it will work. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't have gotten you involved. I'm not blaming you. I just wanted you to know. Tell me, how did the trip go?" "I followed the schedule. Began in Damascus, then Beirut, and other parts of Syria, Jordan, and Egypt, mostly Cairo and Alexandria. Finally, all over Israel, but most of my time was spent in occupied Palestine. Really? Why so much time there? That's a very small part of the Middle East. Abdul looked away to avoid Ari's eyes. It's such a hot spot. I thought it needed extra attention. You may be right, conceded Ari for the moment, but disappointed nevertheless. Any major problems? No, I think I did a good job, accomplished the major goals. I should finish writing up the report by tomorrow. Good. I look forward to reading it. Strange outfit you had me work for. Why is that? Talk about secretive. I called some of the numbers you gave me and nobody answers any questions. Wouldn't even trust me with an address where I should mail my report. Told me to turn everything over to you, that you'd mail it. I understand how you feel, said Ari sympathetically, but they do have to keep their activities secret. And you were just new. That's reasonable, isn't it? Abdul nodded grudgingly. Yeah, to some extent, but they went a little too far, like it was some international spy ring. Maybe some unnecessary paranoia. Ari shrugged. You need a certain amount of it to be in that business, but I really don't know the operation. What did the survey uncover? Abdul took a deep breath. The organization isn't needed in the Middle East, except in Israel, and it won't do any good there. You can't dislodge the Jews from occupied territory with words. It will take violence, outside help, full-scale war. Was that the finding of the survey, or your personal feelings? Well, the survey indicated just what you thought it would. Thousands of university students in every Arab country are discontented with their governments. They want democracy? Abdul avoided the question and Ari's eyes. The common people want to return to Islamic fundamentalism. How'd you learn that? I thought you were only surveying students. The newspapers reported all the time, the shift back to fundamentalism. But your survey didn't support that idea, Ari reminded him. My survey was confined to university students. They're much better informed than other segments of society. Obviously, the difference in mood depends on the level of education and the propaganda people are fed. Uneducated Arabs don't know that Islamic law stands in the way of democracy and real freedom. I disagree. Abdul was growing increasingly uncomfortable. You're closing your eyes to the obvious. I'm not. We interviewed about 10,000 students at random in 7 countries, and I'm giving you the facts. There was almost unanimous agreement that the real threat to peace in the Middle East is the existence of Israel. You can't be serious. Intelligent university students believe that. Why not? It's true. Abdy, Arab nations fight among themselves and do it in the name of Allah. You can't blame that on Israel. I believe in Allah, may his name be praised, returned Abdul. Israel is the problem in the Middle East. She occupies territory that belongs to the Palestinians. Naturally, that creates tensions that even cause the Arabs to quarrel among themselves. Until that situation's made right, nothing else is going to work out over there. I abhor Zionism, responded Ari, and I'm sympathetic with the Palestinians. But Israel can't be that important. It's one of the tiniest countries in the world, hardly a speck on the map, and the Palestinians are just a small fraction of the Arab world. There are global issues to face. Israel and Palestine can wait. With all respect to you, and I've admired you as my professor and mentor, you're wrong. That issue is central to everything else. Israel is a cancer in the Middle East. It has to be destroyed. Reject that idea, and you can't do anything in the Islamic world. The survey proved there's only one cause that Arab students will rally around: the destruction of Israel, justice for the oppressed Palestinian peoples. You're avoiding my question. By that phrase, don't the Arabs mean the destruction of Israel? There's no other solution. And that's what the Arab leaders mean by peace? Abdul's face had darkened and his eyes flashed angrily. Israel has committed atrocities against the Palestinians. You can't imagine how bad it is until you see it for yourself. I was almost out of my mind, especially when I talked with the Palestinians themselves in Israel. I promised them I'd fight for their cause. What else could I do? What do you mean, fight for their cause? With weapons? Attack civilian targets like they do? Become a terrorist? You can call it terrorism, but it's war. I'm shocked, Abdy. Look, I'm not defending Israel, but we can't be partial in our justice. Worldwide terrorism, attacking or taking innocent civilians hostage who have no relationship to the Palestinian problem at all, you call that war? Yes, it's war, and we're going to win. Abdul was not backing down. Since when were innocent civilians the primary target in a war? Most of the terrorism in the world is orchestrated by Muslims. And in the name of Allah, doesn't that bother you? They've been driven to it, insisted Abdul, by Israeli atrocities, bulldozing their houses if they sympathize with the Palestinian cause, expelling their leaders from the country, all in deliberate violation of their basic rights. Abdul threw up his hands. You just don't understand. Well, I'm trying to, muttered Ari, but you're not doing a very good job of explaining. The key is Israel. Take care of that cancer, and everything else will work out. That's too simplistic, Abdy. I'm disappointed in you. If this were your dissertation, I'd be embarrassed to be your sponsor. I didn't want to argue, said Abdul defensively. I just wanted you to know my decision. When I finish the report, I'll give you a call and bring it by, with all the survey forms and a full accounting of all expenditures. There was about $3,000 left over. When Ari returned to the apartment and finished showering, Nicole was in the kitchen listening to the news while she sliced and buttered bread and brewed the coffee for breakfast. The military crackdown, the massacre at Tiananmen Square, the return to a police state, the setback for human rights in China. The bleak recital of events blared from every station. World reaction had been instant and impotent. Shocked disbelief was followed by anger, then talk of retaliation and of sanctions to be taken against a despotic regime. Talk without action. Everyone knew that nothing would be done, not against China. Horrible, lamented Ari wearily as he slumped into a chair at the kitchen table. Nicole turned off the radio and brought Ari a cup of coffee. Standing behind him, she put her arms around him, leaned down, and kissed him on the cheek, her long hair falling down to caress his face and neck. He reached up and pulled her down again for another kiss, this one on the lips. How he loved this woman. But you predicted a massacre, she said sorrowfully, so you're not surprised. Not surprised, but horrified. It was worse than anything I expected, and we haven't seen the end yet. They're still rounding up the leaders. Ari leaned on the table and put his head in his hands. You can't know what this means to me, Nikki. His voice was choked. I knew so many of them, recruited them, painted a picture of liberation. They believed me, and now the timing was all wrong. If this wasn't the time, why did they do it now? I thought you gave the orders. Ari clenched his fists and slammed them onto the table in frustration and anger. It was Roger's group, jumping the gun, interfering, a flagrant breach of our agreement. You couldn't stop them? Ari shook his head slowly. Not this time. I hope they've learned their lesson. But at what a cost! They sat together in silence as Ari tried to confront a grief that was beyond words. The whole world's in mourning, sighed Nicole at last. Nothing else on the news. Lots of noble condemnations from political leaders, but no action. What can they do? It's maddening. After another long silence, Nicole asked, Have a good run? I met Abdy in the Tuileries. He called earlier. I thought I heard the phone. So he's back. How did it go on his first assignment? First and last. He doesn't want to work for the organization anymore. Why not? He says he's disillusioned with nonviolence. I get the feeling he's joined some terrorist group but was embarrassed to tell me. He just hinted at it. I can't believe that. I know Abdy too well. He's sweet and gentle. That's not the way he sounds now. Ari slid his chair next to Nicole's and stroked her hair thoughtfully. I understand how he feels. I've felt the same way. Maybe you can talk to Abdy. He thinks so much of you. And of you too, darling. She looked at him admiringly. Their eyes met and communicated without words the depth of love they had for each other. Ari leaned over and kissed her lightly on the lips again. I couldn't live without you, he whispered. "Oh, I think you could," she teased, "but I couldn't live without you." "I'm not the easiest person to get along with. I know that," confessed Ari. "But we've never had a fight in all these years. Some kind of record, huh?" Nicole smiled. "What is there to fight about?" Her eyes communicated volumes. Appreciation, admiration, commitment, love at its purest. "Back to Abdy," she persisted. "I'll give him a call my first free moment today and set up a time for both of us to sit down with him again. I know him too well to take this seriously. I think he's just discouraged. And so, my love, are you," she added tenderly. "What can I do to help?" "Just be here. Always." Ari groped for words. He took her in his arms and clung to her. "If you should ever leave me—" Nicole held him tightly. "Never. You couldn't get rid of me if you tried."